Take two before Republican leaders claim victory on a massive tax overhaul, the glitch that will force House members to vote again.
But I'm not getting paid, certainly not. I'm here on my own free time, and I think that it's important. This is called democracy for those people that don't understand it.
And gearing up early for a bitter battle, the party predictions on the fate of Darrell Issa's congressional seat.
We were able to mirror the good half of the turtle shell over the big gap in there.
Talk about turtle power, the novel solution that helped this turtle swim into her new life in San Diego. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Congress was on the verge of passing the major tax bill tonight, backed by Republicans and President Donald Trump. But after a House vote today, the process hit a snag.
The yeas are 227 and the nays are 203. The conference report is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
This Republican bill is not tax reform. As I've said over and over, this is the worst bill to ever come to the floor of the House.
And we may see a repeat of this scene tomorrow. After the vote, the Senate parliamentarian ruled that two provisions violate a rule that allowed the bill to pass by a simple majority. Both involve education savings accounts and an exemption for private colleges, and were deemed unrelated to the budget. The Senate will vote on the bill tonight. The House will have to re-vote tomorrow. This is how the local delegation voted today in the House. No House members have said that the required changes will change their vote. The only one to cross party lines was Representative Darrell Issa of Vista. The $1.5 trillion tax bill would add to the budget deficit while granting tax relief to businesses and individuals. The final version of the tax bill could have an impact on homeowners and potential home buyers, especially in California. Mortgage interest deductions will be capped at loans of $750,000. That's a decrease from the current cap of $1 million.
Some might say, well, hey, maybe that's a good thing. Home prices cost too much anyways, and it would be good to see prices come down. But the problem is it doesn't help us to have prices lowering if it's that much harder to pay for those houses in the first place.
That's the director of the State Department of Housing and Community Development. This week, the National Association of Realtors suggested the tax bill could cause California's home prices to drop by an average of 10%. KPBS News is following tonight's developments out of Washington. For updates on the tax bill and more of our reporting on what it means for taxpayers, go to kpbs.org. As Republican Congressman Darrell Issa voted against the tax bill, demonstrators were outside his office as they've been every Tuesday for the past year. His district has been named one of the most vulnerable Republican districts in the nation. KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John reports on what promises to be a heated campaign to flip the 49th.
Do your job, Issa, do your job.
Nowhere else in the nation have protesters shown up this consistently. Every Tuesday morning, the sidewalk outside Darrell Issa's district office is filled with people chanting and carrying signs, calling for the congressman to be ousted and Trump to be impeached. The rallies began last December, right after the election, when Issa, a 9-term incumbent, was nearly unseated by a little-known Democrat, Doug Applegate. Issa won a district of nearly 400,000 registered voters by fewer than 2,000 votes.
Congress, do your job!
Ellen Montanari of the group Indivisible has led the rallies, and even she is amazed at how the passion of the early demonstrations has persisted.
I thought it was going to evaporate after Resist Trump Tuesdays. I thought it was going to evaporate when the summer hit. I thought it would evaporate once the holidays hit, and I'm not seeing anything evaporating.
This level of grassroots activism is unusual a whole year before the election.
But at the end of the day, just standing around and yelling doesn't get the job done.
Tony Kravaric, chair of the San Diego Republican Party, is skeptical that the rallies signal danger for Issa.
I would argue people are being paid to show up, so you have a lot of this AstroTurf stuff stuff going off. So I don't really know how actually deep this stuff goes.
I would take the money, but I'm not getting paid. Certainly not.
Bill Ryder of American Combat Veterans of War is one of the protesters. He laughs at the idea that he's being paid to be there.
I'm here on my own free time, and I think that it's important. This is called democracy for those people that don't understand it.
There are advocacy for climate change. There are advocates for Planned Parenthood. There are advocates for criminal justice reform.
Dominic Nguyen says the rallies have become a focal point for people with all kinds of agendas.
As well as generally just trying to change the political narrative to more community-based, as well as getting rid of the corporate interests in our government.
Flip the 49!
Montanari says she and the protesters are unpaid, but the campaign to unseat Issa has registered a super PAC called Flip the 49th, which is raising money. Flip the 49th has declared fundraising totals of over $400,000 so far, and 40% of that is raised locally. Instead of spending it all on TV ads, they're investing in neighborhood organizing.
To date, we have trained over 200 neighborhood leaders all across the 49th.
Cipriano Vargas is a paid community organizer for Flip the 49th. He's building an army of volunteers, like this group that gathered recently in a Solana Beach park.
We have contacted both through phone banks and doors, more than 7,000 individuals in the 49th, and we have a goal of getting to 70,000. It's an aggressive goal. It's an ambitious goal, but I think we can do it.
It's unusual to have this level of community organizing happening a whole year before the election, especially when the campaign does not yet have a candidate to campaign for. 4 people have jumped into the race to oust Issa: Doug Applegate, a former Marine colonel who ran in 2016, Mark Levin, an Orange County environmental attorney, Paul Kerr, a Rancho Santa Fe real estate investor, and Sarah Jacobs, a Hillary Clinton campaign advisor and granddaughter of Qualcomm's Irwin Jacobs.
Many people are asking, what is Flip the 49?
But Vargas says this campaign is not about a particular candidate. It's about knocking on doors and listening to what voters have to say.
So it's not even about his accomplishments.
Republican super PACs are also gearing up for the battle over the 49th. Republican political consultant Jason Rowe works for 2 national super PACs, the American Action Network and the Congressional Leadership Fund.
I think it worked perfect. It's right by my house.
Here he's strategizing with a camera crew on locations for their next TV ad. But Rowe says his super PACs are also shifting their focus.
What's different from what you typically see with the super PACs that are really mostly focused on television first and foremost, and maybe digital advertising comes in second, and once in a while mail. I think what you're seeing now is much more of a focus at the grassroots.
Rowe says while the local Republican Party faithful will mobilize neighborhood campaigns, he'll focus on new technology to reach voters.
What we used to do door to door, identifying voters, knocking on doors, talking to friends, doing all those kinds of things, you can now do with a couple clicks.
Flip the 49th volunteer Michelle Burrascano is doing it the old-fashioned way, knocking on doors.
The vast majority of people are really willing and anxious to talk. They are frustrated with the way things are going politically, and they are just desperate to share their frustrations.
Darrell Issa is one of the wealthiest men in Congress. The Flip the 49th campaign knows it's unlikely to raise as much as the incumbent and the independent super PACs supporting him. They're banking on voter frustration and a very early start on grassroots campaigning to make a change. Last midterm election, voter turnout was less than 50%, but with all the money and energy building in the 49th, campaigners on both sides hope many more voters will get engaged in this key congressional race in 2018. Alison St. John, KPBS News.
County health officials say the worst of the hepatitis A outbreak is most likely over and that the local health emergency could end by January. For now, though, the health emergency continues. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has more.
I like to use the analogy of the fire. We have the containment of this outbreak, but there's still some hot spots that we need to make sure we get under control before we say the emergency's over.
County health officials say San Diego is well past the peak of the hepatitis A outbreak.
And we're now down to about 2 or 3 cases per week, which is a dramatic decline.
From May to September, the county was confirming around 80 Hep A cases a month. In October, that started to drop. Just last month, there were 20 confirmed cases, and so far in December, only 2 Hep A infections have been found.
We anticipate that if we continue to have this level, or hopefully even a lower level of cases that are reported, that at the end of January, we think that we can move to the next phase.
Part of that next phase includes ending the local health emergency, which has been in effect since September. Tuesday, the Board of Supervisors voted to extend it another 2 more weeks.
It needs to continue because of how long it takes for cases of hepatitis A to appear. It can be up to 7 weeks before someone gets symptoms from when they were exposed. So you know it's going to take a while before we know what happened 6 or 7 weeks ago.
571 cases have been confirmed since the outbreak first started last November, with 20 related deaths. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
San Diego-based Jack in the Box is selling the Qdoba brand. The fast casual restaurant chain has seen its sales decline over the past year. The buyer is Apollo Global Management, a private equity firm. The deal with Jack in the Box is worth $305 million and is expected to close by April. Sailors and Marines will have a few extra dollars in their pockets thanks to a pay raise in the defense budget. It's money they say they need to live in an expensive city like San Diego. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh went out to talk to some sailors and has this story.
The 2.4% raise is the largest since 2010. It's also larger than the 2.1% proposed by the White House. That's thanks in part to a bipartisan push by Senators Joni Ernst and Elizabeth Warren, who insisted Congress begin following a law that ties military salaries to the government's cost of living index. Ting Du is an E3. She says the cost of living in San Diego can be daunting for young sailors.
Certainly for some for young people who join in, may be a little bit discouraging, but with this news, I think it will be very encouraging for them.
San Diego is also one of the areas which will see a small increase in the money set aside for military housing expenses. Next year, for the first time, the basic allowance for housing will be over $2,000 a month in San Diego, even for the lowest-ranked sailors and Marines.
That can only benefit the service members and our sailors that live out in town to help them with the cost of rent that's rather expensive.
Overall, Congress has cut back on the housing allowance. The most expensive city for military housing is still San Francisco. One caveat in the raise, Congress must lift the budget caps put in place to avoid a government shutdown during the Obama administration. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
A lawsuit against the city of San Diego, the police department, and an officer involved in a deadly shooting in the Midway district has been dismissed. KPBS and other news organizations sued for access to surveillance video in the case of Fredun Nahad. The man was suspected of having a knife, but it turned out to be a pen. A federal judge has decided the officer acted reasonably and found no evidence that Nahad's constitutional rights were violated. Firefighters now expect the massive Thomas Fire to become the largest in state history. 271,000 acres have burned since December 4th. That's just 2,000 acres shy of the Cedar Fire that burned in San Diego County in 2003. Firefighters in Ventura and Santa Barbara counties are bracing for the return of strong wind gusts tomorrow. Dry, windy weather will also return to our area this week, but not before a chance of rain. Brittany Boyer has a look at the forecast.
Thanks, Maya. Hopefully everyone had a great Tuesday. We have a few more clouds sneaking into the area tomorrow and also just a couple degrees cooler. It is going to be a weak front. If we're lucky, we could get a sprinkle and we could really use the rainfall. The downfall is behind this front, while the fire danger will be increasing late Wednesday and also into Thursday as well. So the front is over the northern half of the state right now. Of course, up there they are going to get some of that moisture down toward the Bay Area, but the farther south this gets, that's where we start to run out of moisture, and unfortunately we are going to be talking about those winds increasing as well. For tonight, 49 degrees, increasing clouds for your overnight hours, and we'll take a look at some of the conditions tonight. Ramona, 33 degrees. Mount Laguna, we'll call it partly cloudy near 37. Up toward Borrego Springs, temperatures tonight are going to be in the low 40s. Here's a look at what we expect for our Wednesday. The frontal boundary will be making more progress to the south. Again, we might be lucky to get a stray shower late in the day tomorrow, and we've we've only had a trace of rain so far this month. Typically, by now, we'd have about 0.8 of an inch. So anything that we can squeak out with this frontal boundary is going to be beneficial, especially here across our area. Looking at conditions for tomorrow, I mentioned a few degrees cooler out towards San Diego, 65, Ramona 63, 62 in Oceanside. At Mount Laguna, we're looking at temperatures in the low 50s. Once this front passes through behind it, high pressure is going to build in. We get those gusty winds right around it, and that is where we could see the rapid fire growth. We're looking at Wednesday afternoon and also into Thursday here. 9 a.m. on Thursday. Here's a look at some of the wind speeds that we're expecting. So we will have the gustiest of the winds out toward the canyons and also the passes, but something we're really going to have to monitor here with these Santa Ana winds setting up once again. Here's a look at some of our local forecasts. Out at the coast, clouds will break for some sunshine tomorrow, staying nice and sunny, getting into the upper 60s by Sunday. Inland 67 on Thursday, and lots of sun into our Friday. Even travel weather is looking good this weekend. However, Sunday will be another day out in the mountains and also the canyons that we will have to watch out for the return of some gusty winds. Back to you, Maya.
The U.S. House of Representatives paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to settle allegations of workplace discrimination. Newly released numbers come from the House Office of Compliance. From 2008 to 2012, $342,000 was paid. The cases involved sexual harassment along with sex, age, and racial discrimination. The details do not specify if the accused were members of Congress or their staff. California's state lawmakers are dealing with their own fallout over sexual harassment allegations. KQED Newsroom Scott Schaefer talks to Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon about what he thinks should be done to change the culture at the state capitol.
Speaker Rendon, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
So much going on in Sacramento and the country, not the least of which is the sexual harassment scandal that is sweeping not just Sacramento but the country. We've seen one assemblyman resign. We've got another stepping back under some serious accusations, another state senator under investigation. How did it get to this point?
Well, it's clear that we have a crisis with respect to sexual harassment, not only in our building in Sacramento, but also in the culture in general.
Well, is it a surprise? I mean, were you shocked? Because there's this whisper network, right, that people talk about members and staff and who's a problem. I mean, did you not hear any of those things?
Well, I did recognize when I took over the speakership, I realized that our policies and procedures, for example, were outdated. They hadn't been updated in about a decade. We actually didn't have policies and procedures in the State Assembly for dealing with sexual harassment until 1993. So I certainly knew that we had work to do.
One of the things that triggered all this is a letter that was sent out and signed by initially 140 women in the Capitol and people in politics. And among the people who signed that letter was your wife,
right,
Annie Lamb. What did she teach you about sexual harassment, and why did she sign that letter?
She talked to me a lot about things that she has experienced herself in the Capitol, but also things that...
At the Capitol?
Well, in the Capitol community. I don't know specifically if they were in the building. She talked about things that she'd experienced, but also experiences that other women have communicated to her as well.
And is this something, I mean, a lot of times women need to bring the men along. I mean,
right.
Does she teach you something that you didn't know?
She teaches me a lot. In general, she's always sort of informing me about different perspectives. And to a large extent, she helped to, whereas I think I was focused on our policies and procedures and all of those types of things, she helped to sort of bring them to life by telling me sort of real stories that real people had experienced.
Matt DeBobne, the assemblyman who has been accused of some really egregious things by lobbyists up there, Pam Lopez. You have not called on him to resign. Why not have him resign?
Sure. Well, the allegations were made this week, were made public this week, so I appointed an independent law firm to investigate these claims. In the meantime, Mr. DeBobne has been relieved of his duties as banking chair, and we're going to go forward with the investigation.
Let's talk about taxes, and specifically the Republican tax plan making its way through Congress. Jerry Brown the other day called it evil in the extreme. It seems to target blue states like California with relatively high taxation rates. What are your concerns about the impact that some version of that bill that ultimately gets signed could have on California?
I was with my parents on Monday night, and my dad was talking specifically about the impact that it will have on him. My dad's a retired veteran. My parents are like a lot of retired folks are on fixed incomes. This is anti-veteran, it's anti-student, it's anti-homeowner. As you said, it's going to have an undue impact on California, on New Jersey, on New York, on a lot of the so-called blue states.
One of the possible impacts, of course, is that people will no longer be able to take the state and local tax deduction on their federal returns, which essentially makes taxes in California more expensive.
Well, we have a lot of concerns. First of all, we know we're a donor state. We don't get back what we pay to the federal government, and this will just compound that.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about, there's always tension between Republicans and Democrats, but up in Sacramento, it seems sometimes the tension is between the Assembly and the Senate, both of which are run by Democrats.
Right. We talk a lot in Sacramento about the divisions between Democrats and Republicans, the divisions between progressive Democrats like myself and moderate Democrats, the divisions between North, South, East, West. But it's important to think about all that we've accomplished. We have the 5 most progressive gun bills in the history of the United States came out of our legislature. The 5 most restrictive tobacco bills in the history of the United States came out of our institution the past couple of years. $15 minimum wage, farm worker overtime, our climate change battle. So we've done a lot.
The state Senate, of course, is led by your counterpart, Kevin DeLeon. He is jumped into the race against Dianne Feinstein. You haven't made an endorsement in that race yet. Do you agree with him that it's time for someone new? Do we need fresh blood in the Senate representing California?
I'm not sure. I haven't talked to either candidate about the race. I obviously worked with Senator De Leon, and he and I have accomplished quite a bit together. Whether or not it's time for new blood in the U.S. Senate, I'm not sure.
Different styles, the two of you.
Certainly different styles, for sure.
Yeah. The other race you've have endorsed in is the governor's race. Jerry Brown, next year will be his final year. You've endorsed one of the dark horses in the race, John Chung, the state treasurer, who most people say doesn't have a great chance of winning. Why have you endorsed him?
Well, first of all, John has been was a great member of the Board of Equalization, fine controller who really in that position stood up to Arnold Schwarzenegger like nobody else did at that time. Fantastic member, a state treasurer as well. John, incidentally, is a great personal friend of mine and has been for a long time. I think he would be a great governor.
And you can see more of Scott Schaefer's interview with the Assembly Speaker at kqed.org. Those behind the Me Too movement were named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. And now the woman who started the hashtag will help bring in 2018. Tarana Burke has been chosen to do the honors at the ceremonial ball drop in Times Square on New Year's Eve. The Me Too movement has been the catalyst for the revelations of misconduct and harassment that have impacted politics, entertainment, and media.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the latest on the Republican tax plan and how it would affect Puerto Rico's fragile economy. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
New arrivals today at the International Space Station.
And Scott Tingle of NASA makes his way into the International Space Station for the first time.
3 astronauts from the U.S., Russia, and Japan joined their crewmates after launching from Kazakhstan over the weekend. They'll be there for the next 6 months. And this is the first trip to space for astronaut Scott Tingle, who is a commander in the U.S. Navy. 3D printers are being used more and more for prosthetics, and now it's helping a local loggerhead sea turtle. Earlier this month, scientists at Birch Aquarium tried out the technology, creating what they believe is the first ever turtle shell brace using a 3D printer. KPBS reporter Claire Tregesser introduces us to the marine reptile benefiting from the treatment.
Say hello to this resident of the Birch Aquarium. She's been living there for 3 years after being found at a power plant in New Jersey. When she was rescued, she was underweight and had a problem. A piece of her shell was missing.
So as she grows, that shell wants to fill that gap,
and it's causing some curvature in her spine, and so we need to stop that.
Jen Nero-Moffitt is the head of animal care at the aquarium. She came up with a novel solution: create a brace for the turtle using a 3D printer.
We were able to mirror the good half of the turtle shell over the big gap in there.
Moffitt worked with Scott McAvoy at the Digital Media Lab at the UC San Diego Library on the project.
And come up with a perfect form-fitting piece that just snaps right in there.
The brace is just a $4 piece of plastic, McAvoy says, but because he scanned the turtle's shell, it fits perfectly. Epoxy holds it in place.
We just put the prosthetic in last week, and it took fabulously. It went just according to plan.
Moffitt says as the turtle grows, they'll make bigger braces to fit her shell. The turtle is doing well, gaining more than 130 pounds in her time at Birch. Moffitt says she's very glad for the new addition to the aquarium.
Sea turtles are very charismatic and great ambassador animals, and to have children have their faces pressed up against the windows and be so excited to engage with that animal is really inspiring.
Sea turtles live up to 65 years, so Moffitt hopes this turtle will be greeting visitors for a long time to come. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, 100 million people are pushed into poverty because of the cost of health care. The new report shedding a light on this global problem. And on Midday Edition, the state of housing in San Diego, balancing the need for new homes with the challenges in the new GOP tax plan. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. KPBS News is following tonight's developments out of Washington. A Senate vote is expected tonight on the tax bill with a House revote in the morning. You can find updates on what it means for taxpayers. Go to kpbs.org for that. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.